Hello and welcome back to Mr. Pepper's Construction Technology class. Today we're going to go over how to use a leveling rod, a builder's level, and a tripod to do basic land surveying observations. Alright, let's go ahead and run down the basics of how to read a leveling rod. On this side, the yellow side of this rod, it's fractions. On the back side, the white side, this side reads in decimals. So for the decimals, we don't read inches, we read the decimal points. It all stays in feet. You could also call it an architectural side of the rod. On this side, on the fractional side, this side is on feet and inches with fractions in between. So let's go ahead and run through an example of how to read one of the fractions. Let's say that I have a line coming through right here. On that line, where am I at? All right. On all of our leveling rods, the red numbers are going to resemble the feet. Note how I've got 4 feet on here. So this spot is actually right here on this leveling rod. So how do I read this? Red marks are in feet, like I just said. Okay? So within our scope of view, we might only be able to see part of this rod. So that's why they put the feet in multiple places. Note how I've got 4 feet in between my 8 and 7 inch marks. So if my mark is right here, I know, measuring up from the ground, that I'm at 4 foot high, 7 inches tall, and an unknown fraction, right? Because I haven't passed the whole number of 8. Let's go ahead and break this down now. So all of our points on here, on this kind of tape or leveling rod, all the points are either going to point to a whole number or to a halfway point. So over here on the side, I'm going to go ahead and write whole. Same thing down here, I'm going to write whole. Now, Mr. Pepper, what are the marks in between? Well, I just said this mark right here was what? It's midway between 2 whole numbers, right? What's another word for midway? Halfway. Okay, so we can go ahead and mark this, and this side is in fractions, so we're going to write it as 1/2. We've got our 1/2 written on there. What are all of our other measurements? Because Mr. Pepper, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Okay, each gap, or the thickness of each black line, is the equivalent of 1/8 of an inch. So if this gap from here to here is 1/8, then that means my first line is at 1/8 of an inch on the bottom side of the black line. Now, what I just say that this gap was 1/8 of an inch, right? So that is the equivalent thickness of this line. Okay, all these little lines on here, the black lines, they're 1/8 of an inch thick on the fractional side. So if that's another 1/8 to that point, what do we have? We're at 1/4 of an inch right there, okay? So I'm going to write 1/4, and thus the pattern continues. So if I go another 1/8 inch on top of a 1/4, I'm at 3/8. Then I've got my half, right? We already have that marked. Let's keep going. On top of the half, we've got 5/8, and then we've got 3/4, and then we've got 7/8, and then we're back to our whole. You see how that breaks down? It's 1/8 of an inch every time. So on the bottom side of each line, we're always going to have an 1/8 inch measurement. The top of the line can always be either 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, because whenever we're reading measurements, we don't want to read, hey, you've got 4/8. That's the same as a half. Go ahead and simplify it and make it easy for the rest of us. Okay? So once again, the marks coming from the whole mark at the point is 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, a 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, and a whole. Now, let's go back to our earlier example. We said our line was here, right? So if we're looking through our builder's level and we have our horizontal line coming across our level rod indicating where our level line is, if that mark is right there, it's pretty easy to read now. So we know by the 4 foot mark that's indicated in the red here that we are at 4 feet. So we are at 4 feet. Remember, the black numbers are inches. So that is 4 feet 7 inches and 1/4 of an inch, because we have 1/8, another 8, that's 2/8, that simplifies to 1/4. So our answer here is 4 foot 7 1/4 inches. Not too complicated, right? Let's move on to the decimal side. Now we're on the architectural side of our leveling rod. On this leveling rod, it is white, but that doesn't always mean that every leveling rod is going to be the same. So to note on the decimal side or the architectural side of the leveling rod, what's different from it compared to the fractional side is that there's an extra line right down here, as well as our midway point is now flipped the upside down way. Okay, so our whole numbers for now are still pointed up on the top, but notice how the middle is flipped the other way. So I said that we're reading this side in decimals, all right, as an architect would. We're still going to read the same as our feet mark, okay? Our feet are still in red on this side of the measuring rod. Our big 4 is down here, but we've got some little 4s in between to help us with our field of view whenever we're out on the job. So I know that this whole fraction that I've got here, this whole setup, is all going to be at 4 feet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write 4 right here as part of my answer. Then, remember I said that this is the decimal side of the leveling rod. So we're going to go ahead and put a decimal point right there. Now, on this, our halfway point is still our halfway point. Okay, so that's still kind of half. But when we're reading this side, note how this doesn't go up to 12 inches anymore. It's because it's in decimal form. So these black numbers are tenths of an inch, our first decimal place after the decimal, you know? So if this is our tenths place and we're measuring up from the floor, and let's say our builder's level line comes in right here at that line. So I know coming up, I'm at 4 feet, and then I'm going to look at my tenths first. Let's go ahead and mark those. Tenths. Okay, so those are our tenths marks. So I'm at 4 feet, and then I'm at 6 tenths. So let's go ahead and write 6 on there. That's our first decimal place. These lines on this side are no longer 1/8 of an inch. They are representative 0.01 of a foot, or 1/100th of a foot. Okay, so the gap in between each of these lines and the thickness of each of these lines is going to be the same. On this side, it's going to be in hundredths of an inch. Okay, so this space here, from this point to this point, is going to be our first decimal place. So that one is just 0.01. Now, what did I just say? Those are going to be the same thickness as the gaps as the lines. So that is another 0.01. What's 0.01 plus 0.01? 0.02, right? So I'm going to go ahead and write 0.02. And that pattern is going to continue the rest of the way up. So let's go ahead and keep filling it up. So that point is at 0.02. Here we're at 0.03, 0.04, and 0.05. Notice how 0.05 is halfway between the tenths. All right, just like 10 divided by 2 is 5. Same thing here. All right, halfway between the tenths is a 0.05. Then we're going to keep going. 0.06, 0.07, 0.08, and 0.09. And then we're back to a tenth. Now, let's go back to what we're trying to find. We know that our builder's level, with our horizontal line coming across, is hitting this line right here. So we already know that we're at 4 feet, 6/10 of an inch, and then we just count up. So to the bottom of this side, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how that still lines up with what we came up with earlier, with that being a 4. So we know that we are at 4.64 feet off of the ground. All right. that's just a basic intro of how to read the leveling rod. If you've got any questions on this still, please shoot me a direct email and I'll get you some more examples. All right, now outside here in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and get our builder's level and tripod set up, as well as start learning how to use our measuring rod to take actual elevations outside. So whenever we're taking elevations, we already know how to read it now at this point, so we can see those values on how they're fluctuating, but we still don't fully understand how those relate to one another, right? So here's a basic example of how to tell the difference. Let's say that we've got a hill that goes into a little valley, all right? Our builder's level establishes a level line above each of those two surfaces. If we're on the higher surface and we have this rod set right up on top here, that rod is only going to read, say, 1 foot at that mark where it reaches the horizontal line. Now on our valley here, you'll notice that if we put our leveling rod there, it comes down a lot further, right? Let's say it comes down 2 feet. The difference there is that the smaller measurement represents a higher point of elevation relative to the other points of measurement that we're collecting within our data point set. Okay, so take a look at that one more time. We've got our horizontal line that's being established by our builder's level. Across that line, our shorter measurement will represent a higher elevation. Say we're on a hill, a larger measurement away from that level line represents that we are in a valley or a depression of the land. Okay, let's move on. Now that we've learned how to read fractions and decimals on the leveling rod, let's go over how to set up our basic builder's level setup. So everything starts with a tripod. Tripod has 3 legs, simple enough. Try. Whenever we have it set up, we're going to take the spikes and force them down into the ground all the way around. That way we know we're sitting nice and level. Note, as we've set up this tripod, I had it pre-set up for this, I've gone ahead and gotten the tripod pre-leveled, or pretty close to it. That way it makes the leveling process of the builder's level a lot easier. Now, moving forward onto how to set up the builder's level, you just have a small screw on the bottom side of this tripod that screws into the base of the builder's level. All you have to do is get that hand tight. You don't need to tighten it like Superman, alright? Just nice and snug. It's not going anywhere. Once you've got it attached on there, on the side of most builder's levels, there's going to be a circle with a level bubble inside of it. Once you get that bubble centered into that circle that's inside the side of this thing, you know that's your level and you're ready to start taking measurements. Now, the level on this one is kind of hard for me to read. I can't get a straight view over the top of it. So I'm going to use this mirror on the side here to look directly at it and verify that my bubble is right in the middle of that circle. If I need to make any adjustments, I just turn these 3 knobs that are on the base here until that is perfectly in the center. Okay? All right, here in this video, we're looking at the bubble within our circle. Can you see how that bubble is almost perfectly centered in there? The more perfectly centered that you have that bubble, the more accurate your measurements will be. Once that's leveled, I have a few more controls that I can use on this thing. Our basic controls are if I'm needing to really see someone that's very far away and I'm just a little bit off with the viewpoint, I can turn these small knobs on the front here and it will start pivoting to the right or to the left. Now, once I'm kind of lined up with those people, these are based off of focal lenses. So what I'm going to do is, if someone's a little bit blurry, I'm going to turn this big knob. This is my primary focusing knob. Okay, once I have my image brought into focus, I'm just about ready to take a measurement. The last thing that I need to do is there's a knob right here on the end, right around the eyeglass point that you're going to be looking through. If you turn this knob left or right, it will clarify the crosshairs that are built within this builder's level, that we are able to read your measurements accurately off the leveling rod. Now that my tripod and builder's level is completely set up, I can begin to start taking my elevations here in my yard. Alright, I'm going to do my elevations 10 feet spaced apart. So my first one's going to be right here, and then we're going to do 3 more proceeding backwards away from the camera. So at this first position, I'm going to look through my lens and see exactly where we're at. So if you look inside the lens of the builder's level, you can see that we're lined up just under 4 foot 6 inches, and let's go ahead and round up and call it a half. Now that we've moved to our second position, I can now look through our builder's level and see exactly how our elevation is starting to change. So let's see where we're at right now. As you can see, our second position is at 4 foot 1 1/8. Now we've moved our leveling rod to the third position. We're going to see here in a second if we're on the back side of that hill or still on top of that hill. Let's take a look. Currently, we're at 3 foot 10 inches on the leveling rod. So what this means is that our elevation is still changing. All right. If we remember back, our last elevation was 4 foot 1 inch 1/8. So with that measurement being smaller compared to our level line, that point is actually still higher. We have not yet gone off the back side of that hill. So that's position 3. Let's see what position 4 has in stock for us. Now we're set up in position 4. Position 4, this is as far back as we're going to go for today's exercise. Let's take a look and see what elevation we're at. Currently, we're at 4 foot 3 7/8 inches. What does that mean for us? So that is a larger measurement than our previous measurement of 3 foot 10 inches. So what's happening right there is we're on the back side of that hill now. So the water drainage is going to start going towards the back, and it is going to drain off that way now. So we've reached the crest of our hill. Now we're on the back side into the drainage area. If you got any more questions, please feel free to ask me in the comments or shoot me an email. Thank you.